Started. As Dr. Olson mentioned, my name is Matt Bowman, and I'm a sergeant with the University Police here on campus. Friday is my 20th anniversary, so I'm kind of excited this week. Yeah. This is a tough topic, and Kirsten and I have been teaching it in this team mode to the supervisor certificate program now for about a year. So this is my 7th or 8th time doing it in this room in this format. We had a tragedy on campus last week that really took a lot of Dr. Olson's time. So she was forced to reschedule patients from last week into this week, doubling her workload. And that's why normally her presentation goes till about 11 o'clock in this format. But she unfortunately is called away to the good work that she does. So she's doing that. So we are going to get out a little early. So don't worry if you have a conflict up against the 12 o'clock hour. And I'm not going to follow back up with your boss, too, to tell him, well, no, they got out. You mean they didn't show up? That's not I don't do that, right? So you can take the time as you see fit. Hostile Intruder is active shooter rebranded after the 2014 tragedy and then the subsequent Merced, our sister campus, the attack that they experienced. There's being an edged weapon attack. UCSB purposefully rebranded our presentation to Hostile Intruder to encompass things like edged weapon attacks and car-borne attacks, which we're seeing, unfortunately, worldwide and even in our state more frequently. This is to let the cat out of the bag. So the longest version I personally do of this talk is 3 hours. It's another team taught with a psychologist format. The version that you're seeing today is really, and I'm just going to let the cat out of the bag, my blatant sales pitch to have you go back to your home department and say we need to bring Matt Bowman in to provide the training specifically to the members of that work group. There are a lot of advantages to that, and the fact that after we do about an hour's conversation, then I'll meet with every individual in their workspace and help them continue to develop that personal plan. What would I do if the threat was in my space, or where should I try and flee to in a lockdown kind of a situation, right? So that's that personalized, individualized training that's so effective. So if this feels kind of like a sales pitch, yeah, because it is. But it's also our time to spend together. So I have a format that I follow. I've got a PowerPoint that I will go through, but genuinely my 20 years of training experience tells me the most beneficial use of our time together is for me specifically to answer your question. I've got a lot of scenarios, I've got a lot of ideas, I've got a variety of topics that I definitely want to encompass, but not at the expense of getting your specific question, comment, or concern at least addressed to some extent. I very much rely on the subject matter experts in this field, and for us that's the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the Secret Service of the United States, and the Department of Education. I teach the run, hide, fight methodology, so you'll see some of that. A portion of what we're going to talk about today, too, is watching the campus's approved video on the subject. If you've seen the video, I can almost guarantee you have not seen it more times than I have, because I get to watch it through all these presentations, right? So that's some semblance of kind of what we're going to go through in our time together. I'm a very comfortable person, so if you have a question in the middle of a sentence, just let me know. Let's engage in that in the moment while the topic's fresh in your mind. Also, even though we just had a break, if your phone rings or you need to step out, please feel free to do so. I'm not a guy that's going to get spun up about something like that, okay? Here we go. So, really the biggest part of the success is Dr. Olson touched on the fact that we have the student behavioral intervention team, we have our threat management team. What she didn't share with you, and you may or may not be aware of, is actually UCSB's programs in those areas were so cutting edge and so dynamic they were actually adopted by Office of the President, and they took our program and our example and spread it across the other 9 campuses. That's really huge, because in essence what that did was it broke down the silos of information. 10 years ago what we would experience is housing would have a problem with a student. And then dining commons would have a problem with the student, and the registrar's office had a problem with the student, and the people in the department had a problem with the student. But the problem is, none of each other knew that the other people were experiencing what they were experiencing. So we really didn't have any grasp on what extent this person's disruptive behavior or concerning behavior Oh my goodness, excuse me, I'm that guy. Stop it. So by getting a group of stakeholders from across the campus community together on a regular basis through the student behavioral intervention team, and then the threat management team at the staff, faculty, and non-affiliate level, it really gave us a better picture. And the other wonderful thing about this group that I love is the fact that they come to this with resources to help the individual that's been reported on. It really genuinely is not a body of people that are like, hope we get to vote somebody off the island today. You know, that really is an aspect of it, because we're very fortunate here at UCSB that it is the community it is. It's a privilege to work here. It's a privilege to come here as a student. So people that don't comport themselves to our societal norms or our policies or our procedures, we have a mechanism to remove them from the programs, the workplace, and from the property even at a legal extent. The other good news is the university is fortunate in the fact that it's served by its own police department. So depending on the time of day or the time of year, our population ranges from about 8 to 10,000 people, those are our residents, to 30,000 people when everybody's at work and everybody's in school, right? So for that, we have a dedicated police department here on campus of 46 sworn officers. So if you look at that ratio officer to population, especially at the nighttime hours, we far exceed the average municipality, your hometown police. You know, we kick Barney Fife's butt. No, that's not right. And that's really fortunate. The other nice thing about, yes, sir?
Does the police department cover Isla Vista? I mean, is there a parameter for what UCSB police cover?
An excellent question. So we are specifically charged with providing law enforcement services on university property, then recognizing the dynamic nature of university life. We are also charged with a mile around any university property. So you mentioned Isla Vista. The university over the course of the years has bought all the property surrounding Isla Vista, so you can't get anywhere in that community that's less than a mile away from our property. The other thing that happened in 1970, the tax base of Isla Vista only warranted 2 deputies to provide law enforcement services there. And it was the late 60s and the riots, and they culminated in a homicide and the burning of the Bank of America building. And so the community said, we need more law enforcement in Isla Vista. And the campus said, we hear you, and we recognize a big part of that community is university student, staff, and faculty, so we're going to do more. And since 1970, we entered into a partnership with the Sheriff's Department of Santa Barbara County, where we provided a third of our sworn officers, or a sergeant, 2 corporals, and 5 officers, to work full-time in the community of Isla Vista, essentially as a deputy who wears our uniform and follows our policies. So it is a cooperative, and one of the examples of the first examples of community-based policing was that shared responsibility. So an excellent question. And it is confusing because frequently you'll see a sheriff's car pull up and then a blue-suited officer will step out and a green and tan deputy will step out, and people are like, never seen that in my experience before, and that's why, because we are partners.
Police station over there off of Marcadero, is that affiliated with the campus police also?
So that's the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department substation of Isla Vista. That's where the deputies for Isla Vista and our officers work out of to police Isla Vista. Yeah, and another great cooperative relationship. The property is UCSB's, but the facility was put in by the Sheriff's Department, so we balance that relationship. So in addition to phenomenal policing on campus, we have a lot of other services. I used to say, my estimate was at any given time there's about 150 people just waiting by their phone to have a student, staff, or faculty call with something that they could help them with. I mean, that's their job, right? And what a fortunate environment that is. Again, the city of Goleta doesn't have nearly that kind of infrastructure around it, or your hometown. Even other college campuses. I work with colleagues from across the nation providing law enforcement services specifically to universities and colleges. And when I talk about some of the things that we just take for granted here at UCSB, they're like, what are you talking about? We don't have anything like that. So it really is a wonderful place to be. And one of those here is represented on the slide. It's CAPS, Counseling and Psychological Services. It's student-based. that conversation where, we talked about, hey, can I walk you over and get you seen by somebody right now because of the way you're feeling? I do call ahead because it makes my reception there a lot easier when I arrive. But I've on a number of occasions walked people over there and sat in their lobby, and they don't like us sitting in the lobby as uniformed police officers, so they quickly will usher us in. And that's an example of that team sport. So again, even if in Dr. Olson's scenarios, you're not willing to be that person to walk them over there, but you want to help make that connection, call law enforcement, call Kirsten, call the distress student protocol, which we'll touch on a little bit. Getting them connected is 3/4 of the battle. It was interesting when you mentioned that. We have another set of services on campus for sexual assault and domestic violence, stalking things, and they have a policy that they can't reach out independently to someone. So if you report in on them, their mechanism, their policies don't allow that kind of progressive contact. So I was glad to hear that Kirsten's services, even though they're not as effective as shown through the course of reality, they have that capacity to connect. Say something again. Kirsten and I team teach this, and we can't say it enough. A lot of the failures, one of the biggest failures that I see in the media rollout after a tragedy gets reported on is people come forward and say, yeah, I knew it was going to happen. I saw it. Yeah, he was voted most likely to go postal. Ugh, where was that? I mean, so, that's such a failure at so many levels in all of our various systems that it's discouraging. The other thing, too, is people don't realize that, well, Matt, what'll happen if I call the cops with concern about a coworker or about a student? The reality is we don't go in and bonk them on the head and drag them out by the hair. That's not law enforcement's role in this, right? What we will do is we will make subtle inquiry. First, we'll do database searches and look at what history they have with the university police, what history do they have with the sheriff's department. If it's warranted, what kind of a history do they have with the law enforcement from where they're from? What's the hometown PD have to say? Maybe something, maybe nothing. One of the things to come out of those visits in Isla Vista that didn't prevent the tragedy was there's actually California legislation now that if law enforcement gets a call of concern, we're actually required by law to do a weapons check of that person. And maybe that would have been helpful in that instance or not. But now we're mandated to. And the whole thing kind of starts it shifts the officer's mind when going to that kind of a call to that greater potentiality. So not only does it make us safer because we're aware what's potentially in the home that we're going to go visit, but then two, it sets us in the mindset of that weapon potentiality.
I have another question too.
Sure.
So what is considered a weapon in your case? Because I've had, like, for instance, I'm a landlord and I had a tenant, and this might be the same in Isla Vista or somewhere. Machete, 3-foot machete, a BB gun, a switchblade, those aren't all considered weapons as far as the law is concerned. Now, is that the same on campus? If somebody has a 3-foot machete in their closet, is that something that you guys consider a weapon, or does it have to be an unregistered gun?
Sure. So what I would say to that is, I can't follow you down the tenet that all of those things aren't considered weapons by law enforcement, because specifically a number of what you listed are. Depends on the context though, right? So if I have a machete in my pocket as I walk down the street of Isla Vista and a cop contacts him and they say, hey, why do you have that with you? And he says it's for my self-defense, that's considered a weapon. If, in the course of their employment, they use it to prune trees, which I've seen happen, then in that context, that same piece of equipment would have a different context. The weapons specificity to the campus is codified in law. So you can't have a knife longer than 4 inches on campus. You can't have a locked blade on campus. You can't have a variety of things, all of which are very clearly codified. Now, one of the main points in your original topic, and then in this one again too, is that balance between society and the constitutional rights of privacy and the sanctity of the home versus our concern about an individual or our willingness to, or ability to go in and verify what's in that home. Those are kind of direct odds in this conversation, right? And that's tough because the ideology that I want to be able to totally have law enforcement go in and invade every privacy a person has to determine whether there's a threat or not, counterposed to I don't want to be the person that gets wrongly identified as that person and have my life torn apart inappropriately, right? So those are the two ends of the spectrum. And society hasn't figured that out yet. We still work within the constitutional limitations, which is very appropriate because there's a lot of time, effort, and energy put into what those protections are. They continually get reviewed in our society through a number of ways. One, new legislation. Two, Supreme Court cases come up with case law on a regular basis to better interpret what those laws are. And then all of that gets communicated down to the various professional levels of which I'm just one branch in law enforcement. Good question, though.
So if we see a student or a coworker with a 4-inch blade walking around, that they keep it in their pocket, that's no reason to be concerned, and call law enforcement so they can ask them about it?
If it's fixed, it's a violation of law. If it's folding, it's okay. If there are other things in that observation that warrant notifying law enforcement, absolutely. If and of itself, I can tell you again, 20 years being on campus law enforcement, people cut limes occasionally to mix margaritas. I don't arrest them in their kitchenette or in their residence hall because they have a steak knife, which happens. You know what I mean? So it all comes into context. So to specifically answer your question, maybe. It depends. Throughout the rest of this presentation, as a matter of fact, probably my go-to answer in most scenario questions is going to be it depends on the sum total of the circumstances and what you knew at the time about them. Just as a fair heads up. Good resources. Has anybody in here ever tied into the student behavioral intervention team or the threat management team? Has anybody made that kind of a campus referral in this group? Do you mind sharing with us what that was like, how it worked, what your thoughts are about it?
Yeah, I mean, I actually want to learn more about the process. The person that I referred, one of the concerns was, is the person that I called about, are they going to know that I'm the one that referred?
Mm-hmm.
So he was concerned about, I think, his own confidentiality. So I actually need to learn more about that process, you know.
Sure.
So I can set them up for this is how, you know, it works. But yeah, they were concerned about a roommate.
Mm-hmm.
So I mentioned this as a resource.
Good. I'm not the subject matter expert on it. I wish that I was. I know that Angela Andrade over in the SRB, her and her staff are the experts and could tell you in and out exactly what all that looked like. And they are really happy to talk about the program. They're proud of it, and they should be. We've hosted a number of system-wide trainings on campus. The most recent was we brought in one of the leading experts in the industry across the nation to come in and give us 2 days of training, 3 days of training with a room full of 80 of us who never left their seats. It was that impactful. And then part of what they did when they contracted that expert to come in was they had some of our internal cases that the SBIT and the TMT had been looking at, and they had him as the subject matter expert take a look at the data that we had to kind of help us make sure that we were gauging what we were seeing and interpreting it appropriately. So the campus this isn't a dark mystery, it's not a deep secret, it really is something that they want people to know about and understand, for sure. Can't stress it enough, the distressed student protocol, it really is just kind of, I'm seeing this, what do I do? I'm seeing this, who do I talk to? I'm encountering this, what are my resources? And it's a 2-page handout, really well done. It's recently been updated, so it is current information. I hate when you get those flyers or whatever, and this number, the number you've called, disconnected, you know, that's no good, right? It's available on the website. I used to print it out and hand it out, but you know, that's not fiscally responsible with my university dollars. So if you just Google or use some other search engine, UCSB Distressed Student Protocol, it'll take you right to here. Now, what about the UCSB alert system? Has everybody signed up for the UCSB alert system? Yeah? Okay, good. So that's going to be the campus's primary way of communicating with you that there is an emergency on campus. Now, it is a system whereby once you have a university email address, you automatically get entered into the system. However, there are other aspects of the system that you may or may not be aware of. So in addition to the emails that we send out, you can log into the system and insert cell phone numbers, so you get texts to your cell phone. And you control what cell phones and you control what information you want to receive. One of the gradations is, I just want to know about stuff that happened on campus, or I just want to know about stuff that happened off campus, or I want both. What I'm told is, if you want to look popular for your friends, you sign up for the weather alerts. That's the most frequent text. No? See? I'm bringing solutions to problems. Just got to know what the problem is that we're trying to solve here. It is directly related to the Clary Act, which is Department of Education legislation that says that institutions who receive federal funding are required to do a variety of things. We have to publish an annual report with extreme transparency with regard to crimes that were not only reported to law enforcement, but that were reported to CSAs, which I can't remember right now. Do you remember what CSA stands for? Clary Security Authority or something? For people that are mandatory reporters, you're essentially a CSA. It means that you have to plug it in. Even if it doesn't go to law enforcement, we have a Clary coordinator on campus now who does happen to work in the police department. That's a recent change. So that the public can be informed with confidence of accuracy the number of times these reportable instances are occurring on the university property. Then we're put up against all the other reporting universities, and they can categorize where we are from a security standpoint, or our levels of sexual assault, or our levels of sexual battery. That's where the alerts come from, is we're mandated to report anytime one of these specific crimes has occurred, or if there's an immediate threat to the campus or places where campus population generally goes. So that's why Isla Vista is included. Some would say we should interpret that to downtown Santa Barbara, but we don't. Yes?
I get those all the time, plus I call the police department a lot because of my position, but that is basically, it's been rapes, there's been the car over there in the parking lot, and it's theft, people are still in. Well, what else is covered, and is it for people who haven't been caught yet? In some instances, like burglary in Isla Vista, because that's what a lot of the alerts are. What other types of things are alerted, and how many cases? I mean, it only seems like we got one yesterday, and it seems like there's one a week, I think. How often do those alerts go out, and for what type of criteria do they cover?
Sure. So specifically, we have to confirm that the crime occurred. So we don't send an alert if we get rumor that this has happened. So that's one threshold. We have to actually have one of our mandatory reporters go and speak to somebody and be convinced that it actually occurred. It's not a real high threshold, but it's higher than just an anonymous phone call, right? Number two, it has to meet the criteria of a level 1 crime. So that's murder, rape, robbery, burglary, which is where the automobiles come into play, and sexual assault, I think, are the 5. And there has to be an ongoing threat to the community. So if, for example, we get word of a robbery in Isla Vista, somebody steals a wallet from somebody and runs down the street and the cops grab him up and he's arrested, we don't send an alert on that because there's no longer a threat to the community that that same suspect's going to commit that same type of crime to a member of our campus community. So it is kind of a finite thing. One of the frustrations you may experience in getting these timely warnings that are a week old is that we just became aware of them now. So we have a brief window to put out that timely warning, even though the crime may be historic in its nature. One of my biggest frustrations as a police officer on campus is people call and say, yeah, 45 minutes ago this guy was here and he was really disturbing. And why didn't you call me 45 minutes ago where I knew where the guy was? I could come there and find and help you resolve your problem. It's really hard to find people in our community, as open as it is, and as tight as it is, you can walk all the way across it in 45 minutes fairly easily. So that's a difficulty. But that's one of the reasons you'll get sometimes those late ones. And the other thing is Department of Education has really come down on institutions trying to get that 100% reporting and that 100% transparency goal. And not everybody across the nation has done that. So they've come down with these $52,000 fines per instance. So if we should have sent out the alert and we didn't, or we sent out the alert and we shouldn't have, or we didn't do it in a timely enough fashion, or it didn't contain the information that would benefit the community, we're subject to $52K per. And it used to be, up until about 2 years ago, the Department of Ed was nice enough they would compile all the failures in those areas to a single $52,000 fine, but it wasn't effective enough a deterrent. So now they are stacking them up, and we've seen hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines opposed institutions across the nation. So we work really hard to get this part right, even though it is frustrating. Some of the challenges we have with the alert system too are who writes the alert, and then who approves the alert, and then who sends out the alert. All of those require human interface. And frequently, especially with the community of Isla Vista, so if the crime occurs at 3 o'clock in the morning, the supervisor will call it into a dispatcher, probably, who will then type it up, perhaps, or the supervisor will type it up on their phone, and then they will send it to a lieutenant who's probably asleep. So somebody gets awoken at 3 o'clock in the morning who has to then read that and proof it. Probably not their ideal, English and grammar and scholastic effort, and then we send it out. And that all has to accomplish in a reasonable time, which we interpret as about 45 minutes. So it's tough. One of the interesting things about the alert system too is even though it is an non-op situation, everybody's in it, we send about 40,000 emails, but we only send about 4,000 text messages. So now that I've recently become aware of that, I'm encouraging people to encourage you and your friends to enter in that text, because that's going to be the timely warning if there were to be an emergency on campus. We want to make sure people get the information. And I was under the impression up until like 2 weeks ago that there was 40,000 texts that were going out and that everybody was getting my alerts. To back up the UCSB alert system, we also have what's called the Wayland system, and it's 9 large speakers that are strategically positioned through our campus that they broadcast information over as well. So that's a potential second way that we're going to communicate if our texts are not effective. Any questions about the alert system? Yeah.
There's one concern kind of about when the alerts go out and if we have international students, and for them to receive the alerts in the way that they would understand, like in the language that would be more familiar with. Same thing with the broadcasting system.
Yeah, those are both hurdles that we haven't overcome yet, and I know that we have people, I believe that we have people working on it. I'm not part of that work group. I know that we work really hard to try and get it right. I don't believe Department of Ed has a component that forces that. UCSB is the type of community we want to provide that, right? It's just a matter of partnering, because then now play that 3 o'clock in the morning scenario where we've already woken up the lieutenant. Now we've got to wake up somebody who's fluent in that or those 1 to 30 languages, and then get 30 of those messages put out. We're never going to hit 45 minutes in that type of a scenario. I can tell you though, before you think the world is coming to an end in this topic, we do contract with a service that gives us language translation so that the spoken word we can get to in a matter of a couple minutes. Dispatch just makes a phone call, they enter in a password, and you connect the person with this third-party vendor who's vetted through the law enforcement channels as being reliable as a credible witness. Our biggest failure is we say, excuse me, little boy, can you translate to your mom what I'm trying to say? That's a total failure, right? Because mom's not necessarily going to tell her son about something she needs to report to the police, or the son's not going to be comfortable asking my question to his mom, totally inappropriate. So that's why we bring in that professional third party.
Is there software that does that? Like, kind of like, you speak into your phone and then...
Google Translate or something similar.
Is that something that a link can be put on and basically people can highlight what's been typed in and input it into that link and then have it translated in whatever language?
It could. I'm aware of a variety of them. I don't know the specifics around them. My guess is our international students, this isn't the only area they bump into that. So they're probably the experts in their best way to get what we're trying to say to them, either in the written word or verbally, to something they can understand. I think it's wonderful that we live in an age where that's possible. I mean, you know, I grew up in a time when we didn't even have cell phones. So the fact that I can, you know, speak into my phone and have, you know, another language come out of it with some semblance of what I'm trying to express is huge. But we're not 100% there, and it's a good question. My guess is, so you're with international students?
No.
Ah,
This was an issue that was brought up at the DSR training.
oh, that one. I happened to miss that day. I was on vacation. But I've been to the previous 3. No, that's good, and I'll take it back and I'll mention it, because I work with the people that facilitate the alerts every day, so that's an
Maybe a
easy
link-
conversation.
Link could be put on there, and a section that says this is for translation, you know, and basically a summary of what the whole thing says. You know, and then that way international students can, you know, input that into whatever the link goes to,
Sure.
which is a Google Translate or whatever.
I like it. I'm picking up what you're putting down. Anything else on the alerts?
I thought it was interesting how you said how few people have signed up for the alert.
I know, right?
In our department, we actually have this as a requirement for onboarding. We
Good.
require them to-
You're maybe a bigger part of my 4,000 than I realized. The first rollout of this was with a different vendor, and what had happened was we far exceeded our licensing contract with that vendor, and then what was happening too is moms and dads were signing up for the alerts too, and then their student went through their whole time here and graduated, moved on, and they never disconnected the service, so we were still paying for it. So it was up to a number like 80,000, of which we knew a great portion were no longer connected with this community at all really anymore. So it happened that that vendor went out of business, and so we were forced to go with a new vendor. And so they tried to, learning from that experience, to roll it in this way. You have to have some kind of a UCSB current affiliation to be in the system. And email was the one that is one that they put together with that. All right. So next, the campus has identified a video. We're going to actually watch the video here in the next couple of minutes. I will let you know that there are some flip phones in it. It was produced some time ago at a neighboring, not a neighboring, but at another campus. We do evaluate it every year and assure that it continues to push forward the Department of Ed's best practices. And so it's still good, but yes, when you look at that and you're like, what is that? Yes, that's a flip phone. Just roll with it. I also did go through the process of trying to produce our own video with our personalized, and that came out to like $60,000, and I was told we could do better with our $60,000 than create a video. So that's why there's no stork tower in the back, sorry. Do you want to go ahead and get the lights? And while you're doing that, I'll see if I can't bring up the video. The video is easily accessed. It is hosted on a library server for us. When I ever need to refer somebody to it, I always Google UCSB Active Shooter video. The video is the keyword in that search string, though I'm just going to tell you. Usually pops up on Google 1 or 2, and then it'll take you to this link. Here we go.
Shots fired on campus. The last thing you'd expect to hear. The odds of being involved in a situation like this are similar to your chances of being struck by lightning. It's a strange thing about lightning, though. We use it as a way to describe something that seemingly has no chance of happening. But how many of us would stand next to a metal pole during a thunderstorm? I'm Randy Spivey. And I'm Jim Sporlinger, both from the Center for Personal Protection and Safety. The possibility of being involved in an active shooter incident on campus may be remote, but the consequences can be catastrophic. That's why it makes good sense for you to spend some time thinking about what you would do if you found yourself in such a situation. It's a sad fact that shooting incidents do happen on college campuses. Because of that, there has been a dramatic increase in preventive measures such as campus-wide violence prevention programs. efforts to identify troubled students, the development of threat management teams, and a major effort has gone into creating and upgrading notification systems and refining response strategies to get law enforcement on the scene faster.
But even the best preventive systems can never be perfect. And let's be candid, if lightning does strike, if an active shooter enters your area on campus, it will be unlike any situation you have ever experienced. And in those initial heart-stopping moments, it will only involve you, other students and faculty, and the shooter. The bottom line is you'll need to take direct responsibility for your personal safety and security. You must develop a survival mindset.
The purpose of this training is to help you do exactly that. With the proper mindset and the necessary tools, you'll be better equipped to react with purpose and maximize your chance of survival if you find yourself in a situation like this.
Survivors make a commitment. They take a personal stake in their own safety and security. They do whatever it takes, emotionally, mentally, to survive a critical incident. They ask themselves the what-if question. How would I get out? How would I survive? What would I do? Where would I go?
We know that these incidents are over in a matter of minutes. Most often, they're over before law enforcement is able to respond.
Your survival mindset is like a protective shield comprised of awareness, preparation, and rehearsal. Awareness involves taking the time necessary to gain a basic understanding of an active shooter situation. Preparation is asking yourself the what-if questions that will enable you to develop effective response strategies. The last component, rehearsal, is practicing your plan.
Shots fired. Do you know what that sounds like? Unless you see the shooter, you may not recognize the sounds for what they are. Gunshots. For most of us, our experience with gunshots is drawn from movies and television that use special sound effects. That means real gunshots can sound artificial. You can lose precious seconds as you slowly realize that these are, in fact, life-threatening sounds.
What was that? That was a gunshot.
In a situation like this, most people, when they hear these types of sounds, having maybe never heard gunshots at all in real life, have really no idea what to expect. And it's not unusual for them to think that they're anything but gunshots.
I would treat any sound that you may perceive as a gunshot as that and act accordingly. Don't second guess it, because when you second guess it, those seconds count.
Those are gunshots.
So what should you do in those precious first seconds? You'll need to figure out what's going on and make immediate decisions. How are you going to survive the situation? Will you get out? Is there a path of escape? Will you hide out? Is there a chance to get where the shooter might not find you? Or will you find yourself in a situation where the only option is to try to take out the shooter in whatever way you can?
These are serious decisions. That's why the survival mindset is so important to develop. Research shows that there's a real difference between reactions of people who've been trained to face stressful, life-threatening situations and those who have not. The first response is the same in both groups, startle and fear. But the reactions between the two begin to differ immediately after that. People who've gone through training, people like you, feel anxious, where the untrained and unprepared begin to feel panic. Trained people begin to recall what they've learned. The untrained fall into disbelief.
Are those gunshots?
At this point, the divide between the two starts to get wider.
I can't believe this is happening.
While the untrained are lost to denial, this can't be happening to me. The trained are preparing to act just as they've rehearsed. Finally, as the untrained descend into helplessness,
We gotta get out of here.
the trained commit to action based on a survival mindset.
Those are too close.
So that mindset is preparing yourself for the eventuality that it might happen, and then if it does happen, just tell yourself, I will survive.
A survival mindset enables you to act quickly and effectively. Let's go back to the foundation, awareness. When you get on a plane and the crew asks you to know the nearest exit, they're not trying to create fear. They're certainly not trying to make you afraid to fly. They're just trying to make you aware, providing information so you can develop the survival mindset for that situation. They know that if there is an emergency, getting you in a predetermined mindset will help you take rapid, effective actions in a stressful situation. They want you to be mindful, not fearful. If you're mindful, you'll be better able to make that first critical decision. Take a tip from the airlines. Like noting the emergency exits, it may only take a minute or two to look around your environment and make some mental notes about how you'd handle an active shooter situation.
When you walk into your classroom, take a look at the exits. Take a look at what is available if I had to hide behind it, if I had to use it as a buffer between an assailant and myself.
Well, it's important for students as they walk around their campus to ask the what-if questions. What would they do if somebody came in with a gun and actively started shooting?
Think of all the contingencies. What are you going to do? Where are your escape routes? Where is the best access to call 911? Thinking about a situation before it actually develops is the best way to be prepared.
Looking at your environment through the lens of survival will help you to take decisive action more quickly. Of course, it's also important to be aware of the people on your campus as well. The fact is, there's no profile of an active shooter. And while we don't want you to walk around campus paranoid that everybody you meet could be a violent offender, we do want you to pay attention to the things that seem out of the ordinary. Accepting that a situation like this could happen is the first step toward decisive action.
So first, figure out the situation. What's going on? Where is it happening and who's doing it? Build your awareness using all your senses. Do it quickly and stay calm. Trust your intuition, your gut feeling. It's a built-in survival mechanism. Some people say it's knowing without knowing why, and it's an invaluable tool. For example, if you hear something that sounds like it might be a gunshot, assume that it is until you know otherwise. Once you figure out what's going on, you'll be better prepared to take action.
If you determine that you can get out to a safer area, then get out and get out fast. Don't wait for others to validate your decision and leave your belongings behind. The best way to survive an active shooter situation is not to be where he is and not to go where he can see you.
I'm on campus, and I'm in Rojo, and there's a guy here shooting people, and he's in a yellow hat.
When you get out, immediately call out to let authorities know what's going on. Do not assume someone else is calling.
If you have a cell phone, call 911 or use any campus emergency phone and be ready to give them useful information and be persistent, as the phone lines may be jammed with other calls. Remember, no matter how good your school's mass emergency notification system is, they can't alert others until someone provides that first critical information. Calmly and quickly, tell them where you are and what's happening.
In some cases, you may not be able to get out. The shooter may be between you and the only exit, or perhaps you would have to enter the area or the hallway the shooter is using. It might be safer for you to remain in place because you're well hidden and well protected. In any case, if you can't get out, then you must find a place to hide out. Find a place that will keep you hidden from the shooter's view and will provide some measure of protection should the shooter fire in your direction. If possible, avoid places that might trap you or restrict your options of movement. Once you've found your spot to hide out, you'll want to keep out the shooter. Hiding in a room that can be locked and that has plenty of things to hide behind is best. Blockade the door with heavy furniture, even if the door can be locked. If the shooter is nearby, though, just lock the door and get totally silent. Turn off any radios or other noise-producing objects in the room that might alert the shooter to your presence. And don't forget to silence that cell phone or pager if you have one. As soon as you have an opportunity, and without attracting the shooter's attention, call out to 911.
If there are two or more of you in the same place, do not huddle together for mutual protection or moral support. Spread out.
Let's do close.
Spread out. It's much easier for someone to shoot a group of people who are huddled in one place than if they are scattered around the room. Even if you're in a small room, spreading out will give you options and make it harder for the shooter if he does get into your hiding place. When spreading out in a room, quietly talk about what you'll do if the shooter enters. Whichever action you're taking, whether it's get out or hide out and keep out, you should help out where you can. Help others escape as you go. Help prevent others from entering the danger area. If someone near you has a life-threatening injury, if possible, provide first aid and keep them alive. Let others around you know what's happening and try to maintain calm and help them focus on survival. Keep in mind, as events unfold, you must continue to figure out what's happening so you can adjust your actions accordingly.
What if an incident begins while you're on your way to class or walking across campus? If someone starts shooting, stay in motion and find protection. It could be a tree. It could be a wall. Anything that will give you some protection while you figure out the situation and see if you need to do more.
Classrooms and lecture halls like this are unique to college campuses, and they've also been the location of prior critical incidents. What could you do if a shooter enters a place like this? There might be some opportunities to get out, either through other doors or perhaps a window. But realistically, people in the center of the classroom may not have the opportunity to get out. In that case, your only options might be to spread out, take cover, or take out the shooter. Unfortunately, you may find yourself in the same room as the shooter, maybe even face to face. You have to assume that his intentions are lethal to you, that his presence is a very real threat to your life. If a shooter has decided to shoot everyone he comes across, he'll probably succeed unless you stop him.
If you can't hide out and you have absolutely no other option, you may have to confront your assailant.
Convince yourself that you have what it takes to survive when your life is on the line. This is a life and death decision only you can make. It's so important to understand that in this kind of situation, anything you do or anything you don't do may involve life-threatening risk. If you determine there's no other option than to take out the shooter, then you must be prepared to do whatever is necessary to neutralize the threat.
Before the police get there, it's you against that bad guy, and you need to do everything you can to try to stop him, because you can't just sit and let him harm you or take your life or take your friend's life.
To do this, you'll need to become more aggressive than you ever thought possible. This means you either disrupt his actions or incapacitate him. Throwing things, yelling, using improvised weapons can all be effective in this situation. But total commitment and absolute resolve are critical.
I'm going to throw this backpack, I'm going to throw this book at him. And then what are you going to do? Well, then we're going to gang up on him. How many are you in here? 140. How many of him? One.
If there are 2 or more of you, spread out, make a plan, and act as a team to overcome the shooter. Once again, you and the group will have to make a total commitment to your action and do absolutely whatever it takes without hesitation. To understand this better, think of the terrorist attacks on 9/11. Up until that day, the conventional wisdom about plane hijackings was that you should be calm, non-threatening, and wait for the plane to arrive at the hijacker's destination. Obviously, that guidance didn't apply to the hijackings that day. In fact, the passengers of United Flight 93 realized this and used a process like we're describing in this program to figure out what was happening. Once they figured out that the purpose of the hijacking was to kill as many people as possible, the passengers took decisive action to neutralize the threat and prevent further loss of life.
During my law enforcement career, I had the opportunity to talk to many people who survived critical incidents. And the commonality they shared was a single-mindedness of purpose to survive. No matter if they were physically injured, they were not going to stop. They were not just going to throw their hands up and quit. They were going to see it through.
You have to tell your mind that, you know what, I will survive. I will never give up. I will live.
There's another possible resolution to an active shooter situation, and that's when law enforcement arrives and takes action to end the shooting. When officers arrive, be prepared to calmly, quickly, and accurately tell them what they need to know. Location of the shooter, number of the shooters, if there's more than one, description of the shooter, and number and kind of weapons they have.
Police, where's the shooter?
I don't know.
What's he wearing?
He's got like a black shirt and a yellow ball cap on.
Do not expect officers to assist you as you get out.
Okay, stay here.
Their first job is to stop the shooter and end the bloodshed.
Law enforcement is trained to go to the sounds of the gunshots and eliminate the threat.
If you're in a room and an emergency response team comes in, you must not present a threat to them. Do not point at them or the shooter. Do not scream or yell. Be quiet and compliant. Do exactly as they say. Remember, they have no way of knowing immediately whether you're one of the bad guys or not.
Police department, show your hands!
The officers have been taught that hands kill, and they're trained to first look at people's hands. So raise your arms, spread your fingers, and show them your hands as you drop to the floor.
The first thing we need to do is make sure that you're not a threat yourself, so we need to see your hands.
They'll know immediately that you're not armed or aggressive. That will help them focus on anyone who is armed and prevent them from mistaking you for the bad guy in a very dangerous situation. Remember, they have to begin by assuming everyone is a threat.
Don't come running up to us. Don't do anything that we could perceive as threatening. Have your hands in plain view. Be as calm as possible, and then be prepared that we probably won't spend a whole lot of time talking to you because we have to go address the issue.
It's important for you to realize there are differences between an active shooter and a hostage-taking situation. The hostage-taker wants to use people as leverage to achieve a goal. This is very different than an active shooter, who is there to take lives. If you find yourself in a hostage situation, remain calm, follow directions, and wait for the authorities to resolve the situation.
In a hostage situation, you want to exercise patience, you want to be compliant, and you want to give the authorities a chance to reach a negotiated resolution.
Historically, the vast majority of hostage situations are resolved through negotiations and end peacefully. But if the situation changes and someone is actually walking around with a gun shooting people, you're in an active shooter situation. The focus of this program has been on surviving an active shooter situation. One of the most effective ways of dealing with this difficult problem is through effective prevention programs. Interestingly, the same survival mindset we've been talking about today can sometimes prevent a situation from becoming violent in the first place. There may be warning signs or behaviors of concern that something is wrong.
We do see pre-incident indicators. We do see some behaviors that might suggest the possibility of eventual violence. And many of these offenders oftentimes exhibit angry or argumentative behavior. They often blame others for their problems. They fail to take responsibility for their own actions. They're what we would call injustice collectors. They perceive every slight as a major issue that they have to take action upon.
If you're suspicious about something or you really have an uncomfortable feeling, far better to report those types of observations and feelings than to just disregard them and hope that they're going to go away. You have many options when it comes to passing this information on to someone who can act on it. You have your campus law enforcement agencies, you have your RAs, you have your professors, you have your counseling centers. Take advantage of one of those options. If you wish to maintain your anonymity, there's ways to do that and still get the information to someone who can take some action on it and potentially prevent a tragedy.
It's okay to say something. There have been numerous shootings across the country that have been prevented by students going, there's something wrong here.
We cannot do this by ourselves. This is a community, and in order to keep it safe, we need everybody's help, their eyes and their ears.
Hopefully, your college or university already has a violence prevention program in place that provides specific guidance on how to maintain a campus free from threats and violence. Remember, it's everyone's responsibility to keep the campus safe. Shots fired on campus, a sound you hope to never hear. But if lightning does strike, you'll always have a weapon, a survival mindset. You can survive.
When I come to your department, we send the link out and you let your staff view it at their pleasure in the privacy of their computer if they choose to or not. And then after some days or time has gone by, more fruitful conversation exists. Essentially what we're asking is to, if you weren't aware of it, identify that survival mindset and how important that is. So to some extent, each of us have that each and every day. The fact that you get up, you go to work, and you provide for your family, and you put food in the cupboard, and then food in yourself and the kids, all that survival mindset, right? This is looking at it a little more impactful, though, in that time of emergency and in that event. And it's really more just bringing attention to something that probably already was there in your primal instinct, your survival instinct. But it's pointing it out, and it's having you focus it as part of the conversation. Because then it makes the other parts make more sense, right? So since I have an established, dedicated survival mindset, then I'm willing to, one, maintain plans for myself to the extent that perhaps What do I do if the threat's in the space with me, in this room? What do I do if the threat's in the building or on the floor that I'm on? And then third, maybe a plan of action, what would I do if I get an alert that the threat is across campus? And you can see how each and every one of those has kind of a different perspective of what you would do and how you would be best served with those personal plans of action, right? Some people work in the same environment all the time. So they go to an office, they've got a desk, they've got an established avenues in and out, they park in the same place virtually every day they can, they use the same route to and from where they're going. And in those, for those people lucky enough to be in that situation, you can develop single plans, right? So I'm at my cubicle, what do I do from here? We also have a large number of folks though in our community who travel all across campus all the time. Custodial, for example, or IT, or the videographer, or myself as a police officer. So I'm in new spaces all the time. And that's okay. I'm still best served by having those plans of action though. I just have to work a little harder at it. So when I go into a space, I'm looking for the entrance that I came in at. Where's another way to get out if I had to use a second entrance, if for some reason that was no longer available to me? If I had a threat come into the space that I'm in now, where is it likely to come from? In this space, for example, there's an exit on this end of the room and an exit on that end of the room. There are windows on this side, but they don't open. And if they did open, we're on the third floor. So jumping out isn't really a viable plan, right? Because the public entrance to this space is on that side, if a threat were to present itself in this room right now, there's not going to be, and we're not going to test it, so don't worry. That door is more likely the avenue as opposed to here, because it doesn't make logical sense that if somebody wanted to get in here that they would travel past that entrance to this space to go to this one. Okay. When I come in and I look at your individual spaces, sometimes I ask really tough questions like, can you lock your door? Where's the key that you need? Who has the key? If this isn't a sufficient lock for the space, considering now in today's age, we want primarily you to have the ability to lock the door from the inside. Can you do that? Is the department willing to spend the money to do it? If the department's not willing to spend the money to do it, what are some ways that I can secure my space on my own? This is what we saw from the UCLA, where people were tying belts on the door opening mechanism, like the little scissor thing. And it's true, if you prevent the little scissor thing from opening, the door won't open. And that's a free, instantly applicable solution. But how much better off you are if you've taken the time ahead of time to think of it. I'm also a big Murphy's Law fan, so if you have a plan, you'll never need it. If you don't have a plan, you'll need it like tomorrow, as soon as you get back to your office. Not that I'm hoping that. The video talks about another interesting aspect too. It says, you know, you're less likely to be involved in one of these personally than you are to be struck by lightning. So even in the recent rainstorms, my guess is that you weren't walking around worried that at any moment you were going to be struck by a bolt of lightning, right? Well, so that's the same sort of thing. The problem is, unlike lightning strikes, we all walk around with stuff in our pockets that constantly tells us about these active shooter instances across the world. So we get this artificial sense that it could happen and is more likely to happen to you. Looking at the statistics, because again, I am a big proponent on not having this presentation be Matt's bright idea and hope I get it right, but relying on the subject matter experts who've taken these events and dissected them over time to a very finite detail and then publishing verifiable reports. The FBI's first big report on this topic was released in 2013 and it spanned the period of time from 2000 to 2013. They used very specific definitions, and that was that active shooter was defined as a person who used a firearm specifically with the intent to harm others in a public space. That was their definition. So if somebody, for example, accidentally shot their pistol off in the bar, why they had the pistol in the bar, I don't know, that wouldn't be considered an active shooter, even though it was a use of a weapon in a public space. Okay? So looking at it from that kind of a perspective, they then released a new report that covered 2014, 2015, and then they last week, or now 2 weeks ago, released 16 and 17. And in there we see some very consistent things, not predictors, because we can't say that. Dr. Olson was absolutely correct in that. If there was a secret formula that I could tell you, that we could plug people in, that we could figure out who the next active shooter was, you know we would be doing that, but it doesn't exist, so we're not there. There are some commonalities, though. Statistically, somewhere around the 94 percentile, these are events that are perpetrated by men. To say that women never do it, we can't say that. That was the postal shooting in Goleta many years ago now. That was a woman. So even here locally, we have an example. In the latest FBI study between the years 2016 and 2017, the age spread between people that perpetrated these crimes were 14 years old and like 67 or 70. So that's a widespread, right? So is that a 19-year-old white male? No. Statistically speaking, these occur 7.5% of the time that they occur is on a college or a university campus. So that's a low percentage. As opposed to 25% statistically, they occur in a business place. Well, now, Matt, my business place is a college campus. So the 7% applies to us, which is good news. Earlier, when I said these get prevented all the time, I frequently have people, sometimes people are nice enough to ask in the moment, and sometimes people don't. That's not on this campus. These are prevented nationwide, worldwide all the time. We're not in a constant battle of preventing these here at UCSB, so don't let me give you that. I would describe that as more of an occasional instance where somebody's starting to go down that road. We look into hundreds a year probably, but they inevitably resolve themselves earlier. Hundreds is too many, maybe a dozen a year maybe, here at UCSB. So the subject matter experts in this tell us that they want us to do specifically 3 things, and I use Department of Ed's language, which is slightly different to the videos, but it's the same sort of thing. So run, hide, and fight. Now we used to teach run, hide, and fight in a very linear format. You ran until you could hide, and then you hid until you had to fight, and then that was it, game over. All right, maybe not game over, that doesn't seem appropriate for the topic. That turned out to be bad science. So now we teach it in a more appropriate way, I think, run, hide, fight in kind of a circular scenario. What am I best served by doing in this moment with the knowledge that I have? Am I best served to run? Am I best served to hide? Am I best served to fight right now? And then as time goes on and information is developed, maybe you don't hear anything or maybe you start hearing something, that may shift where you're best served by being. At its core, for me, run is simply put space between you and the threat. So that may mean get up and run. Okay. It may mean get up and walk over and lock your door. That could be your run, because you transition based on the sum total of knowledge to a hide. Run might be grab your car keys, walk down the parking lot, get in your car and drive away, which is my favorite version of run because it totally removes you from the threat if it's to be here on campus. Hide. So hide at its base is put something between you and the threat. So whether that's locking your door, whether that's locking your door and pushing furniture up, whether it's locking the door, putting furniture up, going into the next room and locking that door and hiding under the desk, all of that works on the hide. Sometimes we're best served to hide outside. So again, at its core, it's just a matter of putting something between you and the threat. So whether that's ducking behind a bush, in the industry we call that concealment, something that you can't see me now, but I'm not necessarily any safer behind it. Versus what we refer to as cover, which is something solid that would potentially physically protect you. So your door is cover, wall is cover, brick, stone, a tree, a car potentially. So if you're outside, you're best served to be aware of your situation and your surroundings and then try and apply the run, hide, fight appropriately. And that may be just get out of sight, play the angle so that you're no longer seen, and it may be something easy to do. And then the one people tend to have the most difficulty with is the fight continuum. And at its base, in my opinion, is do something to try and save your life rather than be a passive participant in being hurt. And what does that look like? Could be anything. I like to, one of the tough questions I'll ask if you have me into your space is, do you have any weapons in your workspace? And because I'm a cop, people most of the time go, no, which is okay. One of these days, I'm very afraid somebody's going to go, yeah, I got a gun in the drawer, you want to see it? And then I'm going to have to take my community service hat off and put my police officer hat back on and be like, hey, we can't have guns on campus, right? Hasn't happened yet, thankfully. But really, it's to get you to look at your space in a different way. Get you to realize that this water bottle, especially the thermoflask, and then you put a little handle on that thing, forget about it. Some would call that a bludgeoning weapon, very effective. But, to remember that in this fight, we're not 1800 pugilists. It's not going to be, come up to the scratch and we're going to duke it out. It doesn't have to be that. They're potentially armed, so why shouldn't you be? Frequently in this conversation, I'll be asked about pepper spray. I give pepper spray kind of a The problem with pepper spray is it can be used against you if it's taken away from you. 1. 2, for whatever reason, manufacturers of pepper spray carried in purses frequently, they put the strongest snap on that thing known to mankind, and you can't get it open. So if you're going to go with it, practice with it, make sure you know how it works. 3, I guess I'm on. Manufacturers sell pepper spray in both either a stream version or a fog version. The stream version gives you a little more distance that you can utilize it as a tool in. The fog is a little more effective in an immediate area, so you need to know which you have so you don't use it inappropriately. And then the last thing I say about it is that in all the scenes that I've been on in my years in law enforcement, even as the person using the pepper spray, I always was affected by it. So to think you're going to be able to use it and then kind of get away, maybe, maybe not. So that's why I really kind of give it a I'm a bigger fan of whistles, or they call them screamers. They're little thumb drive size devices that you pull a pin out and it emits like 125 decibel audible siren until the battery runs out. That's really nice because it does a couple things for you all at once. It makes it uncomfortable for the person to be near you, and it also draws attention to you. Now, maybe not most applicable in the hostile intruder realm, but a comfort in the more likely scenario that you'll find yourself in, because this is such a remote possibility. Any questions about run, hide, fight? Tough crowd. All right, so part of the run, hide, fight and that personal plan of action and the survival mindset is to some extent, you are best served, and we're not going to do it as a group exercise so don't get nervous, but to do a personal assessment. I'm a big proponent of playing to your strengths and trying to limit exposure to your weaknesses. So for example, for me, I'll start. Run, hide, fight. Now, to look at me, obviously I'm a long distance runner. So run is my go-to. No, I'm not a long distance runner. That's not true, actually. I lied to you. But I'm saved on the second one because I'm small and petite and I can fit in small spaces. So hide is not small and I'm not petite and I don't fit in small spaces. So that means I'm kind of running through my list of potential options right now. This is not necessarily the end for me. It just means that I've got to build time into my plan where I have sufficient time to run and I have sufficient time to hide. Or I better my position in that third instance to fight, right? Okay, so now you, sir, we'll start with your insecurities and your weaknesses and then we'll just work. No, just kidding. I said I wouldn't do it. We won't do it. But it is worth taking a look. Now, I will tell you, too, the one mechanism the police department has to help in the fight area is we do offer rape aggression defense training. It's a 4-night course where you meet and we go over self-defense, and then by the end we actually put on padded suits and you actually fight off a simulated attacker. It's very dynamic, very involved, very powerful training. But it is just for women. We offer RAD for men, but it's more situational de-escalation. Unfortunately, the girls get to hit the cops and the men don't get to.
And that's for, what part of the campus is that training for?
For whoever in the community would like to take it. Yeah, we're sending out a D-list maybe today, advertising our next class coming up. It's in June. We've got spaces available if you'd be interested.
Is that like self-defense, like kick the guy in the midsection kind of thing?
Correct, yeah. It is. My favorite part about the RAD program, because we've been, it's a national program of which we participate. We've had 3 times when people have come back to us and shared that they successfully fought off attackers in IV as a result of their RAD training. So, and it's free. Some people, so again, after the self-assessment, so then some people say, yeah, whatever, Matt, I'm just glad my time's over and I get to go free, which is fine. Other people do that self-assessment and they say, well, the area that I'm negligent in is Every day, Matt, I dress professionally, so I wear heels. So maybe that self-assessment then causes them to maybe bring a set of tennis shoes in and keep it at their workspace. Maybe that's what they do. I'm told some people become gaucho baseball fans and bring in a baseball bat and set that in the corner of their, you don't even have to put a pennant up or a glove or a ball or anything, that's okay, right? If it makes you feel better, then that's okay. And it's part of that self-assessment that's so critical. The other thing that I'm trying to accomplish through my time with you today is to break down some barriers between the two of us so that with any luck, by the end of our time together, perhaps you'll consider me your new friend or your continuing friend. Hopefully I haven't lost you as a friend. I don't know. It's too soon yet to know. Because it's a lot easier to call your friend Kirsten and ask her a question right through the ASAP program, or your friend Matt, hey, I don't know if this is even a law enforcement question, but I thought I'd ask you. It's a lot easier to call someone you've spent some time with and built up a little trust in, as opposed to, hey, you don't know me, I don't know you, and this is awkward for me, and maybe you don't even want to take this phone call, but I got this question for you, right? So that's really one of my big goals. The second goal that I have is really trying to encourage each of you to come back to your departments, as I mentioned before, and have me work with your staff specifically in their space. We'll have them watch the video. We'll spend about an hour having a conversation similar to this, although it is a little more expanded because we don't watch the video in it. And then we have a good question and answer period built in. And then, because I'm tricky like this, I set that second opportunity up in private to go around to each space and give people the opportunity if they wanted to ask a question they weren't comfortable asking in front of all their coworkers. So I help build that in. So that's kind of what that looks like. Also, we check 911 lines and make sure that they are appropriately programmed so that when you dial 911 from your desk phone, it displays the right information in the police department. We check panic buttons to make sure that the response time is appropriate and the cataloging at Bay Alarm System is appropriate. And also gives us a good semblance and reassurance that the turnaround time on that alarm specifically is appropriate. I check doors and locks. I help identify shelter-in-place locations. And really, I help either start the conversation or continue the conversation in the workspace because whether people bring it up to you or not that you work with, this is a topic that's on a lot of people's minds to various degrees. I specifically am charged with two specific things. One, to make campus a safer place. But the second one that doesn't get talked about all that often is to help people feel that this is a safe place. The reality is the instances of person-on-person physical violence on our property is non-existent. It's minuscule. And in those reported cases that we do come across on university property, the majority of them are domestic violence. So the reality is you are safe at UCSB, no doubt about it. And more my work is done in an area where people don't feel safe, regardless of that. And it's to varying degrees and for various reasons. I just try and work on that. And some people aren't aware that the police department's actually charged with that second thing, so I'd like to share it with my new friends, so you know. Yeah?
You mentioned that you go around and check phone lines and Bay Alarm. Is that something we can do with comm services? Or like our...
You can. So the way that that's set up is it's what's displayed in dispatch is exactly what's in your billing. So whoever does your phone billing manipulates it. And so if that phone line, that phone extension used to be in a different space, the department your department, whoever owns the phone or pays the bill on it, needs to update it so it displays the appropriate place. And then the other thing we look at too is in some instances, departments in an effort to save money have shared phone lines. So the phone rings in various places. We need to know that that's correct too. And then we need to teach the staff that if they have to call 911 from that kind of a line, that they very specifically say where they are. Because the location service, the worst instance of it used to be 9 different places a phone rang in various buildings. And again, Murphy's Law says the cops are going to start at the wrong one and work their way through those 9 ones to you having the emergency, when if you knew to just say, hey, I'm in Elings Hall, room da-da-da, then we can come right there. Good question.
What about Bay Alarm?
Bay Alarm, generally, I'll call dispatch and I'll say, hey, do you have a minute for us to test alarms? And if dispatch isn't busy, then we'll actually hit the panic button. We'll set it off. We'll let Bay call, so we have a live test of how long it took them to receive the signal and then telephone the responding law enforcement. And then I have them call me on my cell phone, so we get a real live turnaround time. Because I did fight, there was an urban legend that I wasn't able to ever reproduce, that it took like 35 minutes for Bay to call one time. And in the dozens of alarms that I've tested since that came to my attention, I've seen 2 to 3 minutes is the consistent average across the board.
Purple lights, what's the response time on those?
So that's purple light is our emergency phones. They're actually supposed to be blue lights, but lenses, they vary. That's a direct 911 line to the campus police department. We know where those are. They are tested on a weekly basis through a contract with Comm Services, so that's a good system. It is older technology, and in a society today where most people have cell phones in their pockets, they don't continue to get installed as frequently as they used to be, because they're expensive to install, expensive to maintain.
Are those, now, I've had to call in a number of times for those light bulbs to be replaced.
Mhm.
Is that required by law enforcement to replace those within a certain amount of time?
No. It's a facilities management's responsibility. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Criticisms, I'll take those too.
I personally have to say the response time, because I've called you guys about, in the last 2 years, about 15 times, and the response time's been very, very good. So your statement of, we have a good police force,
Good.
as far as I'm concerned, response time's been really good.
Excellent. And so to expand on that a little bit too, it's a unique relationship in the fact that the chief of police of the campus police reports directly to a vice chancellor, who reports to the chancellor. So it's not like Sheriff Bill Brown. If you don't like what Sheriff Bill Brown's saying, you have very limited actually ability to affect change on him. Here, somebody calls the chancellor calls the chief directly, and change happens. I mean, it's just that quick because of the nature of our established relationships. So, anything else?
I like the video. I saw the video 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago.
Good.
And I forgot the part of the hand. You have to show your hand.
We like that.
I like that, and it's good to see the video in some frequency to remember all
Yep.
these things. It's a good video.
It is good. All right, well, here is my contact information if you need it. Let's fill out these forms.